Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Suranjali Seal, and like I always say, if you are somebody that loves literature and is all about literature, then this is the channel for you. In our video today, we're going to continue with the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. We have already covered a part 1 and part 2 video. We've discussed the major characters, the introduction and the major characters who appear in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. It was a line by line discussion, and also I've included analysis slides of each of the characters. So in the same format, we're going to cover this part 3 video, and with this we'll be done with the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. So we're going to cover the remaining characters who appear in the Canterbury Tales. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So we're going to continue with the characters, and we're going to cover the Doctor of Physic first and then the characters that come after. So I just want to give you a sort of a recap over here. Everything that you see on the screen, everything that is in white, all the text that are in white are actually is actually the original text, the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, and everything that you see in yellow, that is to your right, all of that is the literal translation or the line by line translation of the text itself. So this will help us actually analyze a little better and understand what Chaucer is trying to tell us about his characters. So we're going to begin with the Doctor of Physic. So there was a Doctor of Medicine in our company, and in all the world there was no one like him. He spoke of medicine and of surgery. He had thoroughly studied astronomy. So what happens is, he tells us two important traits about his Doctor of Physic or the Doctor of Medicine. He had thorough idea of astronomy and he had thorough idea of medicine. So these are the two body of knowledge systems that he actually was well acquainted with, our Doctor of Physic, right? Now see, I'll give you an example. I'm a teacher, okay, and suppose I also know astronomy. Astronomy, if you know the definition, it's actually the study of all the celestial bodies or everything outside the Earth's atmosphere, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is, if this is the ball of Earth or ball of life where we live, everything above the Earth or outside the Earth is the study of astronomy, okay? So it is a branch of science that studies everything outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Now this is astronomy. Now you see here, he watched his patients very carefully according to the appropriate hours prescribed in astrology. I've mentioned astrology here, and there's a reason why. Now see, I'm a teacher. Now I know astronomy, like I said, okay. I teach, my body of knowledge is English literature and astronomy. I've studied astronomy, just for example. I haven't, I'm just giving an example. Now I know how the planets work. I know how the stars work. I know astronomy, right? I know about the celestial bodies. Now I come here and I'll say, okay, I have an idea of how the stars work. The position of Jupiter and Saturn are such today that we cannot have this class. If we have this class today, then I will not be able to teach well. So you will not be able to do well. So tomorrow, say when Mars and Venus are aligned together, I'm giving an example, okay? This is just an example. So when Mars and Venus are in this position, it's the best time to actually study. It's the best time to actually teach so that you actually can remember everything. It's the best time for you to learn. So let's meet tomorrow when Mars and Venus are in this particular position. It's the best time to study. So what am I doing is, I'm using my idea, my idea of astronomy, the positioning of the stars and celestial bodies. I'm using that to tell you, to predict human behavior, to tell you that, okay, if tomorrow we study when Venus and Mars are so placed, we'll better understand the concept. I'm using my knowledge of astronomy to predict human behavior, to predict that, okay, tomorrow might be good, or today might, at this time might be bad. You know, I'm predicting. This is astrology, right? Astrology is like, you have an idea of the heavenly bodies, you know how the planet system works, and then you actually predict human behavior. You might say that tomorrow might be bad. That's what astrology is, right? Now suppose that we all know this is very, very common, especially here as well, that you might say that, okay, she might have this problem or he might have this problem, so I'll give you this ring. You wear this ring or you wear this stone and everything will be fine. You know, it'll be better. So that is a talisman. Talisman is a kind of like a protection, or it is kind of like a stone or a ring, anything, okay, that you wear, that will that is supposed, it is based on your behavior, predicted behavior. That is astrology. Astrology is that branch of knowledge, right, which is used to predict human behavior, and accordingly you give stones, accordingly you give talismans and all of that, and sometimes they work, right? It differs from people to people how how they actually give you these talismans. So these are celestial objects in the solar system or in the universe. They use their positioning to actually predict human behavior. That is astrology. That's what I'm saying. So the doctor of physics used his body of astronomy. Like I said, I'm a teacher. I know astronomy, and then I use that knowledge to actually predict that, okay, today let's not study, let's study tomorrow, it'll be better, or let's study today, it's a better time today, tomorrow the position of the planets will be such that we will not understand anything. So what I'm telling you over here, I'm using my system of knowledge like this. So I have an idea of astronomy, and I am practicing astrology, right? So now you'll understand this better. I'll read the original text. He kept his patient a for he was grounded in astronomy. He kept his patient a full great deal in hours by his magic natural of his images for his patient. So what he's saying over here is his magic natural, that he observed his patient according to the positions of the stars, according to the hours prescribed by astronomy. He practiced astrology. He had an idea of astronomy, and according to that he used to observe his patients. And then he used to give medicines and all that. So what did he practice? He practiced medicine, and he also made use of astronomy, and he practiced astrology, right? So this is what we know about him. He had thoroughly studied astronomy according to the appropriate hours prescribed in astrology. He was skillful in making talismans for his patients, like I said, right? So if a patient, suppose, has stomachache, just saying, so he will say, you wear this stone. If you wear, he'll give the medicine, no doubt. He'll give his medicine, and then he'll say, also, you wear this stone so that in the future you don't have stomachache anymore. And if the patient asks, how do you know that? Then you say, no, because according to your birth, this planet and that planet, astrology, that's how we practice astrology, right? So this is what he does. So he was skillful in making talismans for his patients, always referring to astrology to make them more effective. Like I said, it's very easy now to understand. He knew the cause behind every malady and sickness. So now we come to his practice, his knowledge system, medicine, right? So he knew the cause behind every malady or sickness, were it of hot or cold or moistness or dryness in the patient's body. He knew the particular humor from which a particular illness showed its face. He was a very perfect practitioner. Having figured out the cause of the illness, he at once administered him the appropriate treatment. So basically, what does this tell you? That he was capable, he was adept, and he knew his trade well. So he knew the cause behind every sickness. He knew what medicine to give. So he was very, very worthy that way. He was justifying his job. That is, he was a worthy practitioner, right? But now you see here, things kind of take another turn here. There's another tinge of color that we have to cover regarding him. So he administered them the appropriate treatment. His chemists were ever ready to send him drugs and medicines, for each of them helped one another to make profits out of their friendship or trade. So basically, he knew, the cause behind every sickness. He knows what the person is going through and why is he going through. He was very able. He was a worthy practitioner. He was a good doctor of physics with a good knowledge of medicine. So he knew what the problem is. But it's how he used to give the remedy. Here there's a tone of satire, a tone of irony that Chaucer is using over here to describe the doctor of physics. Why? Because see, there's a tinge of corruption, right? He says that his chemists were always ready to help him. So he had connections, right? These drugstores and chemists who actually supplied him the medicine, and they made profits out of his trade. They made profits out of one another. How? So maybe if the person is sick, he would not give the required medicine. You see, I'll tell you, I've also heard of, these kind of, I'm just giving, this is an example, okay, this is just an example. Suppose a person is sick in the hospital, okay, and the person is fine, he just needs like 1 day rest and he can be discharged tomorrow. But what does the hospital do? This is just an example. The hospital might say, oh, you have this, you have to run blood tests tomorrow, do you stay another extra day? So he stays another extra day. Again, the third day, they will not give, say, the reports. They will not give the reports in the hospital, so that you have to stay another extra day. So what are they doing? They're actually just making your bill, right, so that they can extract more money out of you. Even if the person can be discharged in one day, they take 2-3 days to discharge the person. So that is a hint at corruption, right? So this is the hint that Chaucer is giving us. That his chemists and medicine, the people who supplied him medicine, were always ready. They profited out of each other's trade. So maybe he gave say lesser dose of medicine so that the person had to buy more and more. Okay, he would not give say if a person can have one dose and be cured, he would give a lesser dose so that he would have to have more medicine. So this is the kind of corruption that he's hinting at over here. He says each of them helped one another to make profits out of their friendship or trade. So that's a hint at corruption over here. Then he knew the authors of the books on medicine. So these are all the names of the authors of the books on medicine. So basically they're telling us that he was able and capable, but he was using his knowledge through shrewd and cunning means, that he was not an honest practitioner. So his priority should be the patient, right? But his priority was profit. So he kept a balanced diet. He never included anything unnecessary, but only that which was nutritious and digestible. He did not know he did not know much of the Bible. In blood red and blue gray he was clad. That's his attire that he wore, and all his clothes were lined with taffeta and fine silk. Now taffeta is a fine lustrous silk or similar synthetic fabric with a crisp texture. These were not generally available in the earlier Middle Ages and were among the more expensive fabrics for the extra time and care it took to make them. So, you know, the fact that he's mentioning this is just to highlight that he had a lot of money. So you need to have money, you need to have that much of finance to be able to wear these luxurious garments, these expensive garments. So that's what our Dr. Physic is wearing. And he spent his money slowly. He saved the money that he had and he made during the plague, and for gold was used to make certain medicines. So this is also highlighting the fact that he loved gold the most, and he loved gold especially. So this is our Doctor of Physic. We're going to do a character analysis. I hope that you've understood this. Basically, he has knowledge of medicine, he has knowledge of astrology, but then he also kind of makes talismans for his patients that can aid them according to the positioning of the celestial bodies. So he practiced astrology as well. He made use of astronomy to practice astrology. Then he had his chemists who were ever ready to supply him with medicines, and the fact that Chaucer mentions that both of them made profits out of his trade or out of their friendship kind of highlights the fact that profit was the only motive for our worthy Doctor of Physic. Our Doctor of Physic was worthy. If he would have completely focused only on the patient, then that would highlight his virtue. But Chaucer satirically tells us that that was not the case. They profited out of each other, so there is a hint at corruption. And also because he wore expensive garments, which is highlighted by taffeta, tells us that he had a love for gold and luxury. So this is our Doctor of Physic. Now we're just going to do a small analysis of this character, and then we're going to move on further. So this is our Doctor of Physic as Chaucer describes him. He describes our Doctor of Medicine in a satirical tone. So we can understand that because he hints at corruption, right? In every line there's this undertone of a satire. Then he is educated, of course, which is highlighted by his knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and also the various books that he has read, and that he also knows the reason behind every malady and how to cure it. He knows everything. He was a worthy practitioner, remember. So his knowledge system was very solid. So then you have his cunning. His cunning is highlighted by the fact that he and his chemists made profits out of each other's trades, right? So he was very cunning in dispensing and practicing actually his trade. And he was greedy because his main motive was to acquire more wealth. So for gold he had a special love, right? Like Chaucer tells us in the end. And then he was boastful. You will understand this when we do the tale that he tells us in the Canterbury tales. So just remember that he's boastful as well. And he doesn't wish for the patient to get better. He just hopes that they do so that he can get more money. So he has the profit motive in his mind all the time. So this is our Doctor of Physic, and now we're going to move on further. So now we're going to talk about the wife of Bath. Now she's widely celebrated, widely read. She's one of the more popular characters who appear in the Canterbury Tales, the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. So we're going to look at how Chaucer describes her to us. So there was also a good housewife from the place close to Bath. She was somewhat deaf, and that's a pity. So this is basically, he's giving us direct description of the wife of Bath. I'll read the whole thing once and then we're going to decipher everything that has to do with her, okay? Everything, all the analysis points. So there was a good housewife from a place close to Bath. She was somewhat deaf, and that's a pity. She was an expert in cloth weaving, so much so that she excelled the workmen of the Flemish town of Ypres and Gaunt. So in all the parish, there was no other wife that dared to go to the collection booths before this wife of Bath, and if anyone did, she was out of all charity, and that is, she got very angry. Her kerchiefs were finely woven, and I swear that they weighed 10 pounds. That is the kerchief she wore on her head on Sundays. The colour of her stocking was scarlet red. They were tightly tied, and her shoes were soft and new, and bold was her face, and fair and red of hue. So bold was her face, fair and red of hue. Let's just analyze till here, okay? So what have we learned about her? She was probably deaf in the ear. That's the first thing we come to know. She comes from Bath, of course, the good wife of Bath, right? So she was deaf. That's a pity, he says. And then she was an expert in cloth weaving, and that she excelled the workmen of the Flemish town of Ypres and Gaunt. So she excelled the workmen there. I'll give you the points that you have to remember, then we can analyze, okay? This is, you have to remember. You have to remember that there was nobody who dared to go to the collection box in the church before her. So she was the one who was always first in line, and nobody dared to question her. Nobody dared to cut the line, you know. She was always the first one. That you have to remember. You have to remember that she was out of charity, and she used to get very angry. So that means people were fearful of her. So that's why she always took the first in line. She was always the first in line. Then her kerchiefs and all these are just kerchief. If you don't know what it is, it's like it's a bigger handkerchief. I think I gave you this picture over here. Yeah, this is the one. That's a kerchief. She used to tie it on her head, and then she used to go to church as well. So this is her attire. Then you have to remember words like this. Bold was her face, and fair and red of hue. So her face was bold, okay? So you can understand when you say something is bold, you can understand the depth, the gravity, and the weight of it, right? So face was bold, and you will see when she tells the story, and when you'll read further her description, you will see that she herself was very bold, a bold woman. How? Now see, she was worthy woman throughout her life. Husbands at the church door. She had married 5. She had married 5 times. And besides the other lovers that she had in her youth. So there were other lovers, okay, she had. And apart from them, she had 5 husbands also. So, but there is no need to discuss that now. And thrice had she been in Jerusalem. She had been to Rome. And these are the places where she has travelled. Okay, these are important things you have to remember. Her face was bold. She had 5 husbands. She had also other lovers in her youth. She is a traveller. She travels from one place to another. And gap-toothed was she, to tell the truth. She sat upon an ambling horse with ease. She used to ride the horse with ease, and on her head she wore a hat which was as wide as the buckler or the shield. So about her hips there was a footcloth. A footcloth is a long garment formerly worn to protect her dress in riding, and on her feet she wore, you wear boots, the cowboy boots, so they have sharp spurs in the end, right? So her boots also had sharp spurs, okay? That's the picture I've given you. See this thing over here, I'm marking it. This is a spur. So in many cowboy boots you'll find these. And she was very friendly. She knew the remedies of love because she had learned this art which has existed since time immemorial. Because her experiences with her lovers and also her husbands, she claims to know what love is. So this is our wife of Bath. What we're going to analyze now is very, very important. So there have been many feminist and anti-feminist interpretations of the wife of Bath as well. So from a feminist perspective, you see her description. She has a bold face. Remember, these are medieval times. Remember, this is the age of Chaucer, right? So during his time, largely patriarchal society. The church and the state were not yet separate. They were still mixed to a certain extent. Religion and politics went hand in hand. So at a time like that, when rules and regulations were clearly demarcated for women, this is the wife of Bath we're talking about. She's bold. People are fearful of her. She is the one who's always first in line in the church. Nobody dares to question her. She's the one who has had 5 husbands. She has had other lovers in her youth, and she boldly asserts that boldness is evident in her face as well. So there are these kind of interpretations also that have taken place regarding the wife of Bath. Okay, so we're going to do an analysis. I hope you understood. I told you what things you have to remember here. Now we're going to look at the analysis of our wife of Bath, and I'm going to give you examples from the text itself. So let us have a look at our wife of Bath and how Chaucer describes her in the Canterbury Tales. So the wife of Bath is one of the 3 female characters in the Canterbury Tales. So if there's a question, how many female characters appear, there can be 2 options. Either they'll give you 2. There are 2 female characters because they are the ones who are described in detail. So it'll be the prioress and the wife of Bath. And if there's an option, if in the option there's 3 also, then you have to say the second nun. The second nun is also present there, but we don't get her description. So we've already covered the prioress. This is the wife of Bath who we are covering now. So she is one of the 3 female characters who appear in the Canterbury Tales. Largely patriarchal society, but these are the women characters who are depicted through Chaucer, right? So she stands out from many of the other pilgrims because she is argumentative and intelligent. When you'll go and read her tale as well that appears in the Canterbury Tales, you'll see that she is intelligent. She knows what to say, and how to go about her ways, and you'll also figure out that she's very argumentative as well. So she's bold and assertive. So this is our wife of Bath. She's a seamstress who flaunts her wealth and believes loudly. So she is not timid. She's not somebody who will back down, and she's not pretentious. She has wealth, she has the skill, and she flaunts them. She shows off her skills. She does not boast, but she shows it off. She's not like, oh yeah, I have this much of talent, but too overly timid, I don't want to show off my talent. She's not like that. She has skill, she has wealth, she has beliefs. She has belief systems also. You'll see she'll assert them, and she's very assertive. She's very open and bold about her beliefs. Okay, so this is our wife of Bath. And also she's a seamstress, right? Seamstress. She flaunts her skill, wealth, and her beliefs also loudly. Remember, they said she excelled many of the workmen. Right? She excels many of the workmen in her trade, and that is a hint at employment. She is good at what she does. She is skilled as well. So this is our wife of Bath. She enjoys her freedom and is openly sensual. Openly sensual is that she has had 5 husbands. She does not disclose it. She does not keep it a secret. She openly asserts. She is bold in her face as well, and in her words and in the way she carries herself. She is not afraid. She boldly asserts that she has had 5 husbands. She talks about her lovers. If she didn't talk about her lovers, and if she didn't talk about her husbands, how did Chaucer know? Remember, Chaucer said that he's talking to these people in the Tabard Inn before they move out on the pilgrimage. He talked to them, and then he found out their description. He's telling us that this is what I found out about them. So if the wife of Bath did not talk about it, how did Chaucer come to know, right? I mean, that's the logic. So she must have spoken about her husbands. She must have talked about her lovers in her youth. And that's how Chaucer comes to know about it and tells us readers that this is the character I met. So she is not a hush-hush kind of a person. She is open and bold and assertive. So depicts women's image and role in the patriarchal society through her own life experiences and the great story of an old woman. So like I said, when you read the wife of Bath's tale, you'll come to know like how she's voicing out against the patriarchal society at the time. She talks about there are women's issues. Like I said over here, we'll deal with that when we do the tale. Now here, the wife of Bath feels she's an expert on relations between men and women because of her experiences with 5 husbands. So she claims that because she has had 5 husbands, she's lived with them and she knows what it's like. She says that she's an expert in relationships. She can give relationship advice because now she knows what a relationship actually is because she has had relationships with so many people. Okay, that's what she says. So her main point in her prologue and in her tale is to explain the thing women most desire complete control, and which she describes as sovereignty over their husbands. So the idea of control and the control over their husbands is central to her character, and this is a bold thing for Chaucer to also say during those times, right? At a time in society when I told you that the society was not as kind to women as it is now. So you forget property rights, forget educational rights, nothing of the sort. And at that time we have the character of the wife of Bath, which Chaucer has weaved, and these are the characteristics that come forth to us. So these are the interpretations that we have had about the Chaucer's wife of Bath. Now we are going to move on to the next character. Now the next character who we are going to deal with here is the poor parson of the town. Now remember I told you when we did the first character who appears in the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales, when we covered the knight in shining armour, Chaucer told us what? That he was virtuous, that he was the epitome of chivalry, right? So he is the character against whom we judge the other characters. So you have the ideal, right? We have all the virtues, all the ideals that we have to strive towards. The knight in shining armour is the epitome of that. He is the example of that. So the knight in shining armour is introduced to us first, and he is the ideal who we have to look up to. He has all the virtues. He is for justice. He is honest. He is hardworking. He is dedicated. He is patriotic. So these are the kind of virtues we have to look up to. Okay. Now against him, when we read the other characters, we can better judge them because they are not so simple. They are corrupt. They are convoluted in their minds. They are scheming characters, cunning characters. When we read them, then we can better contrast them against the knight, right? So we can see the stark contrasts and understand them better. Now here too, we have met so many people of religion, men and women of religion, right? We've met the friar, we've met the monk, we've met the priestess, we have the prioress, we've met her. So still now, all these people who belong to religion or the realm of spirituality, we have got a touch of corruption there, right? We've seen that how whatever the appearance is not the truth. Appearance versus reality is there. There is a touch of corruption that had seeped in to this realm of religion and spirituality. Now we have the poor parson of the town. The parson of the town is a stark contrast to that. He is a good man of religion. The first line to his description itself, Chaucer tells us that he is a good man of religion. So we will see how he is a contrast to all the other characters around whom religion and spirituality revolve. So there are many characters who belong to the spiritual realm, to the realm of religion, and then we've seen that there is this corruption that had seeped into that whole sphere. And now we have the good person of religion, the parson of the town, the poor parson of the town, and we'll see how he is the ideal for people to follow, for men and women of religion to follow, to strive towards. He is a good man of religion. So he is the character against whom we can judge the other characters of religion. Not all the other characters of religion, I'm particularly saying that. So when you'll read his character sketch and then you can contrast it with the priestess, you can contrast it with the friar, with the monk, you'll see what the differences are and you'll understand it even better. So having said all of this, now let's just get into his character sketch. So there was a good man of religion. He was a poor parson of the town. Now parson and pastor, I'll just explain this to you. In the pre-Reformation church, a parson was the priest of an independent parish church. What is a parish? A parish is a small administrative district, typically having its own church and its pastor. Okay, so see, I've already explained what a parish is even in the previous videos as well. So you know what a parish is. I'll just tell you, it's a small area, it's a district, small district. Now you have a church here. One church can have like another organization as a branch of it. For example, in the city, this is just an example. Okay, it's just not practically, it's just an example for you to understand. Suppose in the city you have an ecclesiastical organization and you have a monastic organization there. So this ecclesiastical organization will set up a small church in this district. Okay, the organization will take care of the workings of the church, and in this church, in this small district, this church will look after its parishioners. Okay, so the church will work and there will be a pastor stationed there. So priest or a pastor stationed there. Okay. Now here the poor parson of the town, a parson he's the priest of an independent parish church. So imagine this is a small district and you have the church there. So it's not under any organization or part of any organization. There can be an independent church also. And in this independent church, you have the parson. So this parson is part of an independent parish church. So, but he was rich. wholly of thought and work. So he's a poor parson of a town. He's poor. He's poor in terms of material or materialistic things or worldly things, but he is immensely rich. He was rich and in holy thought and work. He was rich in his virtues. He was rich in spirituality. He was rich in terms of the way he led his life. It does not have to do with material things. It does not have to do with wealth. It does not have to do with money and material things like we've seen the other men and women of religion, right, in the Canterbury Tales. Now we meet a person who's not wealthy that way, but he's wealthy spiritually. He's wealthy in being, right? So then he would preach Christ's gospel. Truly, his parishioners devoutly would he teach. He was kind-hearted and very industrious, and during adversities he was fully patient. So during adversities he was patient. He would look after people in need, people who are suffering. He would be very patient in dealing with them. So and during adversities he was fully patient, and he had proved this many times. He was against the excommunication of anyone in order to force payment of the tithes due to him. Rather, he was ready to help without doubt. Now see, somebody, remember I told you that you had to pay a certain amount of money to the church. Also, remember when I told you about the friar, that he would grant pardon to whoever would give him money. When he would give sermons, then he would even manage to take a widow. He would manage to extract something from a poor widow as well. Remember I told you those corruptions existed. Here, this person is a contrast. He did not believe in excommunicating somebody if he was not able to pay money. He worked without that thing in mind, that I need money or I need to extract money. He genuinely helped people in need. If somebody had sinned, if somebody needed absolution or pardon, he would do it without demanding anything in return. What he cared for is the person itself. What he cared for is Christ's teaching. What he cared for is the person in front of him, whoever is suffering. He cared for the person. He did not expect that he'll get something in return. Okay, unlike the other characters who we have already seen. So his poor parishioners about with money from his own collections and from his own personal income. So he was ready to help without doubt his poor parishioners about with money from his own collections and from his own personal income. Even though he had a small income, he considered himself very well to do. So you see, there's no greed there. There's no corruption in his being. There's no corruption in his motive as well. So this is the poor parson of the town. He's a stark contrast to the other people of religion that we've met so far. So his parish covered a wide area and his houses were located quite far from one another, but he never neglected visiting his parishioners even in rain and thunder. So he was very dedicated to what to his work. He was dedicated to serving mankind, so to say. So even in rain and thunder, if somebody was in need, he would really just go and help them out. He would never neglect anyone. It was thunder and rain also was not any excuse to prevent him from doing what he did. So in sickness or in trouble would he fail to visit them. Even in rain and thunder, sickness or trouble, he would never fail to visit his parishioners, whoever in need, parishioners, whoever were in need. He visited the high and low without distinction. So, there's no VIP treatment over here. He visited everyone. He did not recognize class distinctions. He did not recognize people or did not judge people on basis of their wealth. He visited everybody's house with equal dedication. He never distinguished between the highs and lows, He was dedicated to his work, and that was all he really cared about. It was not about the materialistic worldly life that he cared about. All he cared about was helping people, and that is why he is a stark contrast to the other men and women of religion who we have met. So now we're going to move on with further descriptions. There are 2 more slides to the parson of the town. He is one of the most virtuous characters who we meet in the Canterbury Tales. So let's just move on further. So wherever our parson would go, he would go on foot, and he carried a staff in his hand for support, and he set a noble example for his parishioners by practicing what he preached. So this is something that you have to mention if you're mentioning him anywhere. This is the first, this is something that Chaucer himself highlights, that he practiced what he preached, which is absolutely necessary. We see that the other characters, the other men and women of religion don't really do so. So this is very important, and use them alongside the following metaphors. So he borrowed out of the gospel, he borrowed the words and he used this metaphor always, okay, to refer to them. He says, if gold rusts, what can iron do? A metaphor, remember I had already explained this, metaphor versus simile in one of my shorts, short videos that is. So I have told you that simile is an indirect comparison using like and as, and metaphor is a direct comparison, that is something is something else. So he's saying that people of religion, people like him who have to serve the society, who are doing the work of God, are gold, okay. The rest of the people to whom he gives his sermons, that is the parishioners, common people, okay, layman people, they are iron, they are iron. So this is what? This is direct comparison. He is saying that people like him are gold and commoners are iron, okay. So what is the analogy here? What is the metaphor here? If gold rusts, what can iron do? That is, he is the one who has read the Bible, he is the one who's in church, he is the one who understands God's words, and he is supposed to set a good example for his parishioners, people who come to church, who look up to him, right? Who look up to him as somebody who will share the message of God, or who will share the teachings of God, right? We look up to this person. So if he himself is corrupt, if he rusts, then what can iron do? If gold or the people who are supposed to lead other people themselves become corrupt, then what can the commoners do? They will have bad examples to follow. They will be taught the wrong things. They will not be taught the right things and right examples, right teachings. So if gold itself corrupts, or if people in power or people who are in this some kind of leadership, if they themselves rust, then what can iron do? So this is a metaphor. Have to mention this when you're writing the answer. So by this metaphor, you have to remember this, that by this metaphor, Chaucer, he meant that if moral leaders or leaders in general who we put our trust into or who we look up to themselves become corrupt, then common people like us cannot be hoped to look after our own spiritual and moral development. Hence, people in power, those who guide, should have a moral responsibility and set a good example for people to follow. So people in power, people in leadership should set a good example to follow. So otherwise, if gold rusts, what can iron do? With great power comes great responsibility, right? So now we're going to move on further. So for if a priest be foul, then who will we trust? No wonder ignorant people will neglect the welfare of his soul. So you will neglect yourself, in a broader sense, you'll neglect everything in life. You'll do everything wrong if the leaders themselves guide you wrongly, right? So while his parishioners are honest, a priest should set an example for his parishioners by his own holy living. This parson did not let out his office for hire, leaving his parishioners to sink to sinning. So he never left his job. Like, for 2-3 days I'll go out and in my place somebody temporarily will come and do my work. No, he did not do that. He stayed there and served his parishioners because he did not want to leave them alone. Okay. Then he did not run to St. Paul's Cathedral in London to seek a job as a singer of masses or the souls of others. Nor did he try to make money by working as part of a guild. But he dwelled in his own parish and looked after his parishioners. I'll give you an example, small example, okay. You will not have a teacher running to the villages to teach. I'm giving just an example, don't take me literally. This is just for the sake of example so that you understand. Now, in the villages, that's where you actually need to teach. That's where you need to reach out. That's where you have to teach. But imagine if a teacher is just got 2 jobs. One is in the village and one got in the city. So the teacher will take the job in the city. Why? Because you have a life there, so to say. But then you will neglect the village. But there are teachers who are dedicated like that, who are in the villages, who are living with the people there, helping them genuinely. They don't care about the money, they don't care about the life, they don't care about they go an extra mile to help people in need. There are also other people who say they don't take money from tuitions, they just teach for free. They are going that extra mile because teaching and helping people is what matters. The money does not matter, the kind of lifestyle does not matter. So for him too, he did not go to the city to seek a job. He did not go there to become a singer of masses, or he did not go to St. Paul's Cathedral to become a singer of masses, or he did not try to make money by working as part of a guild. None of that. He stayed in that small administrative district, right, in that parish. He stayed there with his parishioners and never neglected his duty. And why did he do this? Why did he not leave his people alone? So that they stayed safe from the influence of the enemies of the church. He was a shepherd. So this is the analogy again. This is what he's compared to. Chaucer does this. He was a shepherd, true priest, and not a businessman or a money-minded. And though he was holy, he was not without pity for sinners. He was also not contemptuous nor arrogant while talking to them. So just because somebody has sinned, he was not rude to them, did not look down upon them. He always felt like any soul can be saved. Okay, that's his outlook. So he was also not contemptuous nor arrogant while talking to them. He was soft-spoken and sympathetic in teaching them the way of heaven through righteousness. By good example, this was his business. But if someone continued the sinful way, no matter who he was and of what rank or position, he would rebuke them sharply. A better priest than him did not exist, I am sure. So it is not that he was all feelings all the time. If somebody, he gave enough chances for change. If that person still went the sinful way, then he would not forgive him. He would rebuke him very, very strongly. So he waited for no showy ceremonial receptions, nor did he consider himself perfect and above everyone else. But Christ's gospel and the apostles 12, he taught, but first he followed it himself. That is, he practiced what he preached. So whenever you end or whenever you have to mention anything about the parson, mention this last line. He taught, but first he followed it himself. That's the last line to his character sketch. Now we're going to just look at a short analysis of our poor parson of the town. So, Chaucer's parson, the parson, unlike the other religious figures in the Canterbury Tales, appears to be genuinely a genuinely good person, smart and also smart and also as a good leader of people. Instead of a story, the parson gives a sermon on the topic of repentance or being sorry for your sins. So if there's a question that what story does the parson say, tell us in the Canterbury Tales, he does not tell us a story. It is in the form of a sermon. So contrast between his worldly poverty and his spiritual wealth, as money from tithes, his benefits the Catholic Church as an institution, the parson's reluctance shows an allegiance to charity over maintaining church hierarchy. So I said this money would actually go to the church, right? But he did not prioritize that. His priority was the people. His priority was not money at all. So his reluctance to always, go after the money shows us an allegiance to charity over maintaining church hierarchy. And his sermon on repentance highlights his sincere devotion to Christian thought, even amid a playful storytelling contest. So you see, it's a playful storytelling contest. So everybody is going and coming from the pilgrimage, and they will be occupied. Okay, what is the story which I will tell? That's natural. Even in class, right, when we are given presentations, we are occupied with that thought, right? Okay, next is our presentation. This is how I'm going to present it. So, naturally all the people are thinking about the story, but he has not forgotten that he is on a pilgrimage. He's still giving a sermon. He is occupied. So he is a true spiritual person. He is a true man of religion, as Chaucer himself tells us. So now we're going to move on to the next character. Now, there's nothing much that I have to explain you over here, okay? And there's a reason behind it. See, it's a very short description, so I'm just going to read through it. I'll just give you one thing that you have to remember. If you have a very good older brother, if you have somebody to look up to in the household, you'll learn the same thing, right? Chances are, usually that's the case, that if you set a good example for your younger brothers, the younger brothers will also pick up the traits from you. It all depends on how you, the way you behave, what kind of examples are you setting for the young ones to follow, right? So this parson, poor parson of the town, had a younger brother. So with the parson was a plowman, who was his brother. Okay, sorry. So there's no mention of whether he was younger or elder. Okay, so here he was his brother. So I'm sorry, don't mention if he's young or old, but he has a brother. Now my point is, if you have somebody who is setting a good example, you'll be influenced by it in the house, right? So he has a brother. He is a plowman, and who had worked for a long time conveying many cartloads of dung from one place to another. So that's his work. He used to convey, or he used to transport dung from one place to another. That was his work. He was a good and faithful worker, living a life of peace and perfect charity. He loved God best with his whole heart all the time, in good and bad conditions. And next, he loved his neighbor exactly as himself. So he was selfless, and he would beat out grain from the corn. He would dig or repair a ditch to help every poor man for Christ's sake without demanding any payment. So he paid his tithes, 1/10 of the annual produce or earnings, formally taken as tax for the support of church and clergy. So if this is like hierarchical system in the church which existed during the time. So if you have to pay, say if you, this is again an example, if I'm earning say 20 rupees, out of that 20 rupees, 5 rupees I would have to give the church. So it's basically like that. So he also, out of his annual produce or earnings, he had to give a certain portion to the church. So in perfectly honest manner, both on his property and cattle he would pay, okay. And in working clothes he rode upon a mare. Now that's the picture of a mare. It is an adult female horse, or in most cases a mare is a female horse over the age of 3. So over the age of 3 it's a female horse, okay. So that's the picture of a mare. So he rode on it. So there's nothing else to actually explain here. No analysis slide also is needed. Just you have to remember that, you know, because he has a good brother at home, so chances are that those good qualities, the examples that his brother sets, he also picked it up, and now he is also a good honest person, okay. He did not trick anybody, he did not cheat anybody. So this is the plowman, the parson, the poor parson of the town, his brother. So now we're going to move on to the next character. So now we're going to talk about the miller. Now everything about the miller is loud, everything about him is aggressive, everything about him is all strength. Now remember when I did the knight's character, again I said it's a contrast, right, to him. So when we did the knight's character, remember I said having only wisdom but you don't have strength has no meaning at all. If you have only strength that I'm going to hit this person, kill this person, you know, I'm going to act roughly towards this person, but you don't have any knowledge and you don't have wisdom, it's no use. I said knowledge without wisdom. Knowledge is everything that you accumulate, your facts and your information, okay, all the knowledge that you accumulate. If you don't have the wisdom, that is how to use that knowledge, it's useless. And you have only knowledge and you don't have strength, that is also useless. And then I said, if you have only strength and if you don't have wisdom and if you don't have knowledge, if you have only strength, that is also bad. When you read about the miller, he's about strength. He is only about strength. Now I'll read about him so you'll understand the contrast better now, right? So the miller was a stout fellow with powerful muscles and large bones. Look at his description itself. He had proved his strength of his body. At wrestling he would always win the prize. He had short and broad arms and he was thickly built. There was no door which he could not break or push off its hinges by running at it, striking it with his head. His beard was as red as a fox or a female hog, and broad as though it were a spade. Exactly on the tip of his nose he had a wart. This is a hard growth on the skin, and on it stood a tuft of hair. So it's sort of like you can actually Google the picture of a wart, okay. So there's like a small pigmentation or an abnormality on the skin, nothing serious, and on it there was a tuft of hair, okay. So red like the bristles of a female hog's ears. His nostrils were black and large and wide. A sword and a buckler he carried by his side. His sword and buckler, I've already in my previous video given you a picture of it also, so you can refer to that. His mouth was as large as a furnace. Now this is again very symbolic. His mouth was as large as a furnace. When we'll read his tale also, you'll see that he's very aggressive, very loud and very vulgar. So his mouth was as large as a furnace, which hints at the fact that he just says whatever comes to his mind, okay. There's no wisdom on what to say, what you should not say. There's no balance whatsoever. So he's all about strength, and strength without wisdom and knowledge is useless, I told you, right? So it's not attractive at all. So he was a loose talker and indulged in obscene jokes, mostly concerning sins and indecent topics. So he was capable of stealing corn, and so you see, he is not a likable character. From his very description, there's no virtue that Chaucer talks about. All he talks about are his aggressive traits, right? So he charged his customers thrice the actual price, and he was not an upright man. He wore a white coat and blue hood. He could play a bagpipe well, and he accompanied us out of the town playing on the bagpipe. So as they the next day when they embarked on the pilgrimage, he was the one playing on the bagpipe, okay, all throughout. So the miller is blunt, crass and aggressive. He is also incredibly loud, both in voice and habits, exemplified by the bagpipe he plays. So the fact that he plays a bagpipe, it's a loud instrument also. So that all highlights to this loud character of the miller. Okay, so this is all you have to know about him. We're going to move on further. Now we come to the gentle Manciple. Now he is also an important character for us from the Canterbury Tales. So we're going to see what Chaucer has to tell us about him. So a gentle Manciple from an inn of court. He was such an expert in buying provisions. So you will not know what, you will not understand his character if you don't know what an inn of court is. You will have to know what do we mean by provisions as well. So these things need clearing so that you understand the society of the time, and of course, if to understand the text, you have to understand what an inn of court is. So see, an inn of court in London is a group of 4 institutions of considerable antiquity. See, I give you these concrete notes so that you actually can incorporate them in your answers. These are more formal, but I will give you an easy example to understand it, obviously. Okay, so inns of court in London, groups of 4 institutions of considerable antiquity that have historically been responsible for legal education. And the inns of court in London are the professional associations for barristers in England. Barristers, that is lawyers. Okay, so professional associations for barristers in England and Wales. There are 4 inns of court. These are the 4 inns of court. All barristers must belong to one of them. They have supervisory and disciplinary functions over their members. So I'll just explain this in a very informal way. This is a very informal example, but I think you'll understand it. I belong to a school, right? In school, suppose I have taken up arts and I'm studying arts, and in school we have 4 houses, right? The yellow house, green house, red house, and the blue house. 4 houses. Now I have to be part of one house. For example, in Hogwarts also, we have the 4 houses like Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. So what happens is, you as a student, part of Hogwarts, you have to be part of one of those houses. Now in those houses, you have your own rules. You'll have your own dorms. In those dorms, you'll have your own cooks. You'll have in that dormitory also, you'll have your own cooks, your breakfast. I'm just saying, okay, this is just a very layman's example I'm giving to understand. So lawyers in the UK, in Britain, lawyers, they have to be part of an inn of court. There are 4 inns of court. If you're a barrister, that is, if you're a lawyer, you have to be part of one of these inns of courts. These inns of courts have their own supervisory functions. They take care of their own sort of houses. They take care of your own houses. Okay. Now this person, Manciple, who we are talking about, he was from an inn of court. That means he's not a lawyer, but he was part from an inn of court. Now what was his duty? He was an expert in buying provisions. Okay, now you have to understand who a Manciple here is. The Manciple in medieval times, right, during Chaucer's time, a Manciple was somebody who was in charge of buying and selling of foodstuffs. He was somebody who is supposed to store food, buy and store food for an institution. That's what a Manciple is during Chaucer's time. So our Manciple over here, he is from an inn of court. So he was probably the person in charge of buying and storing food for these inn of court, for the inn of court. Any one of the inn of court, he was the one in charge of buying food and all for them. So remember, the barristers and lawyers part of the inn of court. So they need their own food, they need to eat, they need to be able to, they have their own supervisory functions, right? So our Manciple over here belonged to an inn of court, and what was his duty? It was his duty to buy food stuff and store it for these people of the court which he belonged to. So he was not a lawyer or a barrister, mind you, okay? He was not. His duty, like, he belonged to one of these house, and remember that house has its own supervisory and its own functions, right? So there are lawyers studying in that house, and he was the one in charge of buying and storing food for them, for this inn of court. So he was buying the food and storing it. This was his job. So he was such an expert in this that others could learn much wisdom from him in that art. Whether he paid for the provisions in cash or on credit, his transactions were conducted so well that he was always the gainer and always won an advantage. Now see, so they are saying that they're lawyers, right, in the inn of court, and they're so well learned and well educated. But he said that this person who conducted this business so well of buying and storing food, of purchasing and buying food, that others could learn from him, that he was so adept in his work. So then he says that these are the people who could learn much wisdom from him in the art, and he always gained an advantage in money matters and in buying and selling these food. He always gained advantage, so he was never at a loss, of course. So now, is it not God's great mercy that a man of such an ordinary position could have knowledge exceeding the collective wisdom of a large number of learned men? So we come to know that this person is very clever. We come to know that he's very, very cunning and that he gets the best of both worlds. How? We're going to see this, okay? So he was in service of more than 60 masters who were experts in law and were full of legal discernment. A dozen of those masters in the house were capable of supervising the income of the estates of any English lords with such skill as to enable him to live on his income honorably and without debt, or to live as economically as he might want to, and able to help everyone in the shire in any case of any unforeseen event. So the people who he served, this Manciple who he worked for, the people who he served, they had the knowledge to actually do all of this. They have bookish knowledge, the knowledge of law, and they were very adept in what they did. They were very, very profound in their knowledge skill set, and they knew how to use it well. They were very well established lawyers. But this Manciple had the brains to outwit them all. So he could outwit all of them. So what is highlighted over here is his cunning, right? So we're going to understand this a little better through an analysis of his character. So let's just go on to the next slide. So see, in medieval times, a Manciple was in charge of buying and storing food for an institution. Poet Geoffrey Chaucer's use of the term in his story collection, the Canterbury Tales, appears to be one of the first in the English language. So the word Manciple appears first in the English language in the Canterbury Tales. So this is just food for thought. Now, so skillful and clever in his transactions that he gets the better of both the traders from whom he makes his purchases and the lawyers who pay him for their meals. So from where he buys his food and the people who he feeds, that is the lawyers for whom he stores the food, right? He's clever in his transactions. He gets the better of both worlds. That's what I meant. So his duties included accounting for foodstuff in the kitchen and buttery, supervising order in the kitchen and the cook. So his duty was to buy food, store food. He has to supervise the kitchen, and he has to supervise the cook. Now see, further highlighted by the quarrel that occurs between him and the cook. Later we will see in the Canterbury Tales that the cook and this Manciple will fight. So this is the working relationship involved dislike for one another. So because he's the Manciple, right? So he probably had this little bit of a quarrel and a dislike for the cook because they worked together. So it highlights to us that they knew each other. Okay, that's the nature of their working relationship. So this is the Chaucer's Manciple. Now we're going to move on to the next character. Okay, so you see this, the Reeve is the next character who we are going to cover. Now to understand him, I'll give you a small example, right? See, suppose I have somebody working for me. Okay, now this person is in my house for years and ages. Now this person will come to me and will be always reporting things to me. Will be like, okay, that person, no, the person who you employed is not good. He's stealing from you. And I'm like, wow, the person who I have employed, my employer is so trustworthy. Again, another day he'll come and he'll say, you know, I heard him say something about you. You're not supposed to trust him. He's not a good person. I'm like, wow, this employer thinks so much about me. In time, our relationship will develop and we'll begin to have this loyalty based relationship, right? Now this person who I employed, who had always been coming and telling me, giving me information, who I thought was trustworthy, this employee, suppose this employee, I think that, okay, my employee is so good, whoever I have employed, and later what happens, in time he becomes corrupt. He is conducting his own business behind my back without telling me. But because of the years of trust that I have placed on this person, I automatically think that this person is loyal. So every day he will come and tell me, you know, this person said that. Okay, this person is stealing this from you. You know, this person is hampering the business that way. You know, this person is going to leave your business. So, you know, I feel like, okay, this person is so trustworthy and loyal to me. But later what happens behind my back, this person is conducting his own private business. This person is buying my own goods and selling them elsewhere. You know, tinge of corruption there. So the thing over here, what I'm trying to explain is the relationship, that I think that this person is loyal, but the truth is this person is not loyal. He's cheating me the whole time. So this is exactly who the Reeve is, who we are going to study now. The Reeve was a slender and ill-tempered man. His beard was shaven as close as possible. His hair was cut high round his ears and clipped short in front like a priest. So that's the picture I've given you. The hair was clipped short, cut short round his ears, and it was clipped in front like a priest. Okay, it was short, and his legs were long and very thin, like a stick, and no calf was visible. So you have the calf muscle, right? Even that was not visible. He was that thin. So well could he keep a granary and store skillfully that no auditor could detect his tricks. So the hint over here that no auditor could actually detect his trickery suggests to us that maybe he stole from the stocks and the granary. He stole from there and sold it elsewhere. That's the hint that's given here. He could predict by the drought and the rain the yield of his seeds and grain. So he could predict the prediction for the yield of his seeds and grain. That's for the cropping patterns, right? He could predict the weather. So that's his skill. And his master's sheep, cattle, dairy, swine, his horse, and stock and poultry was wholly under his governance. So the master entrusts, see, I am a trusting person, so I'm giving this employee the full governance of this farm. I'm just saying a farm I'm giving, and he's like, you take care of it, but he's been stealing things from there, right? So this is what the master doesn't know. He had been submitting accounts to his master ever since the master was 20 years of age. So you see that the time also actually establishes the relationship, right? So the master could not detect his trickery. No man checking his accounts could find him in arrears. There was no supervisor, herdsman, or servant whose cunning and trickery he did not know. So, you know, he was very shrewd and very, very cunning. So he knew the trickery and the inner planning and plotting of every other employee of this lord. So he would go and talk about them to the lord, you know, that this person is planning that, this person is planning this person is going to steal from you, going to cheat you. So he was in the good books of the lords, you understand. So they were all afraid of him like the death or like the plague itself. He built his house in a fair part of the country with green trees, shadowed with was his place. That means there were a lot of trees in his place, and he accumulated wealth through his private transactions. Like I said, so he had a private transaction going on, and he knew subtle ways to please his lord. He lent his lord his own goods without him realizing this. So suppose he bought plants, okay, the books. Suppose he bought 5 books from me, okay, and he says I'll go and sell it. Then he'll go there and maybe he'll take out my watermark or he'll change it, and like, you know, through his trickery only, and he'll come and give me and he'll say, see, I got new editions of the book, and I'll buy the book saying, thank you, you're such a loyal person, and I buy the book. So I'm buying my own book itself. You understand? So he was up to those kind of tricks. He sold his lord his own goods, you know, by trickery. So without the lord realizing this, so, and received his thanks and a coat and hood as a reward as well. So, you know, like maybe I'm just giving, this is a book that I have, and in that book I have my logo, okay, I put a logo on it, and I give this Reeve that you go and sell it somewhere. That Reeve will go to his underground chamber or underground place. He'll go there, he'll take out my logo and put his own logo, like kind of like he has those things stored with him, right? He'll put his own logo and he'll come back to me and you're like, see, I got a new edition of the book, and I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, so I'll keep it with me, I'll buy my own book back. You understand? So he was up to these kind of deceitful and corrupt ways, and the lord did not realize this. So in youth he had learned a profitable trade. He was a carpenter. He rode a very good horse which was spotted grey all over his body. His name was Scott, and he wore a upper coat of a Persian blue colour, and by his side he carried a rusty dagger. He belonged to Norfolk. He came from the town called Baldwell, and he had tucked his long coat by a girdle about his waist like a friar. Girdle, tucked his coat, everything I've dealt with in the previous videos, so refer to them if you don't know what a girdle is. And he always rode last in a group of pilgrims. So this is the character trait of somebody who has deceitfully wronged you, right? So he rode last in a group of pilgrims. Riding last, this is just my own perspective because I found it very interesting that he rode last in the group of pilgrims, and Chaucer mentions this. So it was very interesting to me. If he's riding last, he has the whole vantage point of all the people in front, right? And he has their back, so he stabs people in the back, so it's like potential people who he can trick. So you see people are walking in front of him and he has full vantage point of all of these people, and so he stabs people in the back. That is also like symbolic for me. Okay, this is something that I actually, when I was reading, I found it interesting. And Chaucer, why would he mention that he always wrote back? There must be a reason why he actually highlighted this fact, right, that he always wrote last in our group. So it is also characteristic of somebody who is at fault, right? You always want to hide, you don't want to get caught, so you're in the last of the group. Nobody will turn and look at you, right? So you're away from people's prying eyes, you're away from judgment. So he's writing in the end of the group. So this was my interpretation of it. So now we're going to move on to the next character who appears here. Nothing much to analyze here. He's also one of those people who belong to the characters who have corruption in their character itself, corruption in their virtues. So he's one of them. So now we're going to move on to the next character. So the character we're going to cover now is the summoner. The summoner was with us in that place. His face was red like fire as an angel's face. He had pimples and he had narrow eyes. He was a passionate fellow, lecherous as a sparrow. He had black brows which were infected or which were itchy. And there was no quicksilver, oxide, brimstone, borax, white lead, cream of tartar, or any cleansing or ointment that could cure him of his white pimples or of the lumps of flesh in his cheek. So he loved the garlic, onions, and leeks. Leeks is almost like an onion only, so it's an edible herb. So he loved drinking strong wine, red colored like blood. He would then shout and talk as if he were mad after that. So when he had drunk wine heavily, he would not speak any language except Latin. A few terms had he, 2 or 3, that he had picked up from some legal document, and no wonder, because he heard those words every day. So he and you yourself know how a jay or a bird can say what or Walter as clearly as a pope. What they're trying to say here is, you see, you have the idea of parroting, right? Parroting means, you see a parrot, when you keep some parrots, especially pets, you teach them how to talk, right? So if they hear words every day, they can actually repeat the words again. So he says that just like a parrot would parrot words, right? Listen to words every day and then they learn the word. He too learned Latin like that. He would listen to this Latin words every day, and that's how he picked up a few Latin words. But if anyone asked him of any other subject, in Latin only, he knew through 2 or 3 words and he would use them regularly. And if you would ask him something else, okay, that's where he exhausted his philosophy. That's where he did not know. He did not know how to answer because he did not know any other words at all. So he would only say what law applies, because these are the few words that he knows. See, the summoner, this is his appearance, right? This is his appearance that they're describing over here. Now, when I'll be doing his, when I'll be reading further what Chaucer says about him, you will see that he has traits of all the other characters who we have covered. He has many of the traits of the other characters, so you will understand this. So I would really appreciate if you would give your insight on the character of the summoner. I would want to know what your input is regarding this analysis of the summoner, because we have already done similar traits with the other characters in my videos. So it would be nice to know your take on him. So I'll just give you hints. We're going to cover the rest of the summoner's character. So let's just move on to the next slide. Now let's look at this, okay. He was a gentle rascal and kind-hearted one. Again, direct description. Our pardoner is, okay. So, I'm sorry, our summoner is, we're covering the summoner. So, our summoner is gentle-hearted and he's kind, okay. His face, a better fellow should not men find. Satire, sarcasm again. I told you in the Canterbury Tales, many of the characters, Chaucer employs satire, sarcasm and wit as well to actually describe them to us. So here he's saying a better fellow should not men find. If someone would give him a gallon of wine, he would allow the good fellow to keep a mistress. So he would allow the said person to keep a concubine or keep a mistress if you offer him wine. That is, he would sell his morality if you give him wine. You could make him do anything. That means he was addicted. He was a drunkard. He was addicted to drinking. So for 12 months and excuse him fully of his sin. So if you give him wine, he can do all the sins and then just imagine like it didn't happen. Like, you just have to give him wine. That's how, you can actually get him to do things for you. You just have to give him wine. So he was capable of taking undue advantage of a girl as well, so that means he had loose morals. He was not a trustworthy character by a long shot. And if anywhere he found a good fellow, he would teach him not to be afraid of excommunication unless he believed that his soul was in his purse, for it is the purse and not his soul that was punished. Purse is the archdeacons or archdeacons hell. And but I know that this in this matter he lied. So Chaucer is saying that the person, this summoner, he is saying that the summoner is telling this person that you should not be afraid of excommunication if you have a lot of money, because with money you can actually redeem yourself. Remember, I told you, I'll tell you this, okay, let me just finish reading. So Chaucer is saying that I know that he lied because excommunication can kill and absolution can actually save him. So Chaucer is also giving commentary of the belief system at the time. He said that it's through the purse. He's exposing the characters, right? He's already told us through the previous characters that if you have money, then you can grant pardons. Remember, I told you very extensively that this character has sinned and he's going to the priest and saying that please grant me pardon. So the priest will say, you give me this much money, then I'll grant you pardon. So the person is scared of heaven and hell. I told you it's ingrained in the minds of the people, this concept of heaven and hell. So the person is so afraid that he'll give the money and he'll be granted absolution, right? I told you this in my previous 2 videos on the Canterbury Tales, so please make sure you watch them. So that is why I'm saying this has the characteristics of the other characters, this a part of the summoner. So what happens, he's saying that because if your purse is punished, it is your purse is punished and not your soul, because if you have money, you're going to give the money and you're going to get absolution. So this is what he's saying. Then again he talks about the general belief that no, he probably lied because excommunication can kill and absolution can actually save somebody. So, and let this guilty man be aware, this is beware of the writ which the authorities could issue. So this is the rule of the time that he's telling us about, that authorities could issue a writ for a man who had remained obstinate after being excommunicated. That after excommunication, a lot of things change. You are excommunicated from the society itself. After that also, if you try to mingle and you come in and try to do your own thing, then that will have other repercussions as well. So the summoner had control over the young girls of the district. What does this remind you of? The friar, when we did. So I told you how the friar at his own expense got girls married, right? So the summoner had control of the young girls of his district. He knew their secrets and was their advisor. A garland had he sat upon his head, as large as a pole projecting from an alehouse, a round loaf of bread served as his buckler. So I would want to know your input on the summoner. I think that it would be an interesting thing to know your views as well. I'm more than welcome to actually knowing your views on this particular character, because it's quite interesting. You have the remnants of the other characters in his character as well. So for example, his appearance was not that welcoming. Then you would also know that he picked up Latin. You remember the prioress could speak French. She picked up French from according to the school of Stratford at Bow, I had told you, and she would talk French in that dialect. She picked it up. Here too, our summoner has picked up few words, Latin words, and he would use it again and again to show that he knew Latin. And I told you Latin was actually the language of the higher classes. So it was probably to actually show people that he also has class, but his behavior is not like that. It's completely opposite. And then he was into wine and drinking. All of this you have. Then you have the corruption that had seeped into him. He is talking about excommunication and how you could actually be granted pardon. So he's talking about the corruption within the church, which we have dealt extensively with in the other characters. So I think you can actually understand the summoner very well now, because he's the second last character we are actually talking about. He's the second last character, and then we have one more character, and we're done with the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales. So I mean, you can, by this time you will know what the Canterbury Tales is about. If you have watched my other 2 videos, if you have covered the characters so far, this should be really easy to easy for you. You will completely see through whatever Chaucer is trying to tell you. So this is the summoner. Make sure if you are interested, do give me your inputs on what you think the summoner is, what is his character analysis, what have you picked up so far from everything that I have taught or everything that we have discussed together. And now we're going to move on to the last character who appears in the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Now, before we read about the Pardoner, he's the last character we are going to talk about in the Canterbury Tales, I want to tell you something, okay? So, Pardoners, they used to offer indulgences. I'll just give you an example. Suppose you are a friar or a priest, you are some authority who is given the right to grant pardons. You have the authority to give pardons. Now, suppose I have sinned and I'm coming to you and I'm saying that please grant me pardon, and you ask me, how have you sinned, what have you sinned, like what is your sin, and then you grant me absolution, okay, you grant me pardon. Pardoners, okay, they had the authority to keep indulgences. Indulgences, are previously written pardons for particular sins. So maybe you might have pardons, a particular pardon you have previously written. It is not on spot. Like sometimes, you say, you go to the church and you say that, I have sinned, so please grant me absolution. You confess and then you're granted absolution, right? But here, you have previously written pardons. You have it, like maybe you already have a pardon for, say, somebody is murdered, so you have a pardon for that. Or maybe you pushed somebody and there's a previously written pardon, working with it. You've not signed it yet, okay? I'm just giving very layman terms, I'm giving example. Don't take me literally, this is just an example. So I've written that, okay, if somebody has pushed somebody, this person will be granted absolution. And I'm carrying this paper with me everywhere and I've not signed it. Now you come to me and you'll be like, I have sinned, I have pushed somebody, can you please grant me pardon? Then I have this this paper, so to say, this pardon with me. I'm like, okay, so I take out that paper which talks about you pushing somebody, I sign it and I give it to you. Like, this is just an example. It was not done this way, but I'm just giving an example. I sign it and I give it to you. So these are previously written things that I've kept with me. So when you come to me, I just sign it and give it to you, right? So in the similar way, these are previously written indulgences. They offered indulgences for previously written pardons. These are pardons which are written previously for particular sins. Okay, so this is the pardoner that we are going to talk about. Okay, so let's just get right into it. The pardoner, with him there was a good gentle pardoner. So with the summoner you have a pardoner. Okay, so who was the summoner's friend and comrade? So they were friends, so that means birds of a feather flock together. So let's just see what is this pardoner like. So they were coming straight from the court of Rome. Loudly he sang the song, "Come hither, love, to me." The summoner joined him in singing the song with his deep voice. So the summoner was singing as well as the pardoner, they're friends, right? So never was there a trumpet that had even half the sound of a singing voice. He had a loud voice. The pardoner had hair as yellow as wax, but it hung smoothly as a coil of flax. Flax seed, if you know, it's a type of seed, you can Google and see flax seed. So his hair was like that, the texture of his hair was like that, like a flax seed, and but it hung smoothly as a coil of flax, and he had a few locks, that is curls. He had a few locks which hung down and covered his shoulders, but they were thin in small bunches and here and there, and he did not have any hood to amuse himself. He did not have a hood to amuse himself. It was packed up and kept in his bag. So just imagine you have a cap and you're not wearing the cap, you have kept it in your bag. So it's the same thing. So he kept his hood, the cloak, the hood in his bag, and he thought he kept up with the latest fashion. So yeah, he thought he kept up with the latest fashion, bareheaded and with his hair loose except for the cap which he wore. Such shining eyes he had as a hare. Now a fast running long-eared mammal that resembles a large rabbit, having very long hind legs and typically found in grassland or open woodland. So you see a rabbit, I've given you an example there, the picture is there, that's a hare. It looks like a rabbit, but it isn't a rabbit, and it's considerably larger in size or bigger in size. So this is a hare. So he had bright eyes like a hare's. So he had a small picture of Christ sewn into his cap. So in his cap he had the picture of Christ sewn there, and in his wallet lay before him on his lap, brimful of papal indulgences, which he claimed to be from Rome. So, you know, there was a lot of corruption that happened also. Okay, so you can understand, you have like previously written indulgences, and you are actually selling these indulgences or giving these indulgences to people who come to seek pardon. You can do forgery also, right? You can do forgery also of them and then sell it to people in larger numbers. Maybe you have the authority to give 5 indulgences, but you actually, now we have Xerox. In today's world, imagine you have one paper and then you just Xerox it and you say that it's original. So those kind of corruptions that are hinted at here. Okay, so forgery. So he had a voice as tiny as a goat's, no beard had he, nor nor was he likely ever to have one. His face was as smooth as if it had just been shaved. I believe he was on a horse or a mare. Okay, so what I am telling you over here is that he's highlighting the corruption that it seeped in, right? I told you this again and again. He talks about it extensively in the Canterbury Tales. Now we're going to look at the further description of the pardoner, and then we're going to analyze his character. So I think this is very on the face and very out there. I think it's very direct in his description. There's nothing else to brainstorm. So we're just going to look at the next part of his character description. Now look at this. But of his craft from Berwick to Ware, there was no other person like this pardoner. So again, satire. He's using satire to come and tell us that the pardoner, there are questionable things that he does. Okay, so this is what he's telling us. For in his bag he had a pillowcase which claimed to be Virgin Mary's veil. He said that he had a small piece of that sail that Saint Peter had when he walked upon water and was rescued by Jesus Christ. These are all allusions or references to biblical stories. So he's telling us all of these things. So he's saying that this pardoner claimed to have pieces of, say, Virgin Mary's veil. He had a pillowcase which he said that it was Virgin Mary's veil. Then he said he has a small piece of that sail that Saint Peter had when he walked upon water. And then he had a cross made of brass studded with gems, and in a glass he carried pig's bones. But with these relics, whenever he found a poor person living in the countryside, he made more money in one day. He had a pig's bone, okay, a pig's bone, and he said those were relics. Okay, he used to say those are relics. These are religious objects of really great importance. And he's saying that these are relics, but actually it was animals' bones, pig's bones. He carried with them and he would say these are relics. And, you know, if some poor person was there, he would easily fool them and sell it to them. So technically he was making use of people's beliefs and fears, and then he made more money in one day than the parson made in 2 months collectively, and thus with pretentious sincerity, trickery, he made everyone a fool. So this is the direct commentary that Chaucer himself gives us about him. But to tell the truth, he was a noble churchman. Within the church, well could he read a lesson from the Bible or the life story of the saints. You see, these are all pretensions, outwardly appearances, that he could read this, he could do this, he was a good person of within the church and all that. But outside of it, he's doing all of this. He's tricking people. He's making use of their innocence and their belief systems, right? So, but the best of all is that he sang a song during Mass, for he knew well when the anthem was sung. He knew more how he must preach and speak in a convincing tone to win or obtain money from the congregation. Again, it's about money. Therefore, he sang in a very loud and merry voice. So this is our pardoner. With him, we are done with the characters who appear in the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales in detail. And we are just going to look at the analysis slide, and then we'll be done for this video. Now look, pardoners offered indulgences or previously written pardons for particular sins to people who repented for the sin they had committed. Along with receiving the indulgence, the penitent would make a donation to the church by giving money to the pardoner. Eventually, this charitable donation became a necessary part of receiving an indulgence. So paid by the church to offer these indulgences, the pardoner was not supposed to pocket the penitent's charitable donations. So I'll just explain this. You are supposed to you're supposed to give pardons, you're supposed to give, like, you have indulgences and you're going to give indulgence, right? You're going to give pardons. Now, the penitent would make a donation, like you've given a pardon, and now because you feel charitable, it was a charity thing. If you want, it was not mandatory. If you want, you can actually give donation to the church because of, because you have the penitent received the indulgence. So out of charity, you would give donation to the church. But eventually, this charitable thing turned out to be mandatory, as is the case we've seen with in many instances in history. We've seen this. So it's not just particularly with the church. Many other places we've seen how something which is not supposed to be mandatory becomes mandatory over time, and it's usually because of people's greed. So here also, this charitable donation became a necessary part of receiving an indulgence, that if you don't give the money, you will not get an indulgence. So that's how times had changed, and paid by the church to offer these indulgences. He's employed by the church pays the pardoner to actually give these indulgences, right? And he is already paid by the church, but the pardoner was not supposed to pocket the penitent's charitable donation. So imagine you're supposed to give 50 rupees to the church. I'm just giving an example. You're giving 50 rupees to the church. You charge 60 from the penitent. So 10 rupees will go to your pocket, and this is not something that pardoners were supposed to do. And here are hints by Chaucer that that's probably what was taking place. It began to look like one could cleanse oneself of sin by simply paying off the church. Additionally, widespread suspicion held that pardoners counterfeited the Pope's signature to illegitimate indulgences and pocketed the charitable donations themselves. So I told you, 5 indulgences you have, 5 people you grant indulgences, you give indulgences, you take 10 rupees, 50 rupees in your pocket. Then what you do, you forge, right? You counterfeited the Pope's signature, and then you make another 5. Now those 5, you are not paid for that. You were officially given 5. So you give 50 rupees to the Pope, and the counterfeited one, the extra ones that you have, right? The ones that you have counterfeited, the money you keep for yourself. So that turned out to be this turned out to be a problem in the end, and this was not something which pardoners were supposed to do. It was against the law. So the pardoner is a particularly bad person, not just by his immoral behavior, but also in the way he deceives people. As a representative of the church, he's allowed to give sermons and convince people to buy pardons. He basically cheats people and makes immoral use of his trade. So particularly selfish and motivated to only satisfy his own cravings. So with him, we're done with the major characters. I mean, all the characters that appear in the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales. I hope that you have understood the character sketches of each of the characters. Chaucer has weaved them beautifully, and he has rightly been called the father of English literature because of that. So I hope that my videos have been helpful for you, and if it has, don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel for similar content. Until we meet again, I hope that you stay healthy and happy. I will be beginning with a new topic in my next video, guys. So see you in the next one.